Fantastic. Well, a very warm welcome to Sophie Pugh, Investor Relations Manager at Nestle. Thank you very much for joining us here today. And let me start first of all by saying congratulations to you and your team for a fantastic achievement in the Europe Executive Team Survey 2020, where you achieved a top spot, first rank overall in the food producer sector, across all the categories, a top rank. Very well done. And share with us your views on what those awards mean to you.
Thank you very much, Amani, and thank you for taking the time for the interview today. No, absolutely delighted to have won the award, and on behalf of the team, thank you very much. It's really great for us to hear that the community is appreciating the work that we do, and obviously great to get that validation that we're doing a good job in the investor relations team. Obviously not always just about the award, but really important just to hear that kind of all of our stakeholders are finding value in the work that we're doing and in their engagements with us. I think kind of that's an important part of the investor relations function, obviously having that role with the investor community and helping them to understand our business and our strategy, but also an important role that the IR team plays with management as well, and helping them understand the views of investors. So no, fantastic to receive the award. Thank you very much.
Yes, very good. We've obviously all gone through a tough year this year. Share with us a little bit about the practices and steps and measures you have taken to actually continue engagement with investors and to keep them aligned and informed at every step.
Of course, as you say, a different year that it's been for all of us in 2020 and continuing into 2021 as well. I think one thing that certainly changed on the IR front was the frequency of our engagements, being more proactive and actually outreaching investors and giving them more context as well. I think in the context of everything being a lot more uncertain, really making sure that our communication was clear and that investors really understood the actions and the strategies that we were taking. Just to give one practical example, in our kind of quarterly press releases specific to COVID-19, we actually gave a lot more detail in terms of how the pandemic was impacting the business on both a kind of geographic and product perspective, but also from a channel perspective as well, as obviously we were seeing some contrasted dynamics there. Our retail business doing very well from kind of the rises of at-home consumption, and our out-of-home business, being more negatively impacted by the restrictions that were in place. So really giving some more detail to investors there, I think was helpful. And another thing to mention actually is probably we were one of the few companies that actually continued to provide guidance throughout COVID, and helped to stick to that, giving guidance as well, which I think gave some investors kind of confidence in the visibility that they were looking for during the difficult times. I guess one of the perhaps more challenges would be switching to everything being virtual, although I wouldn't say that that's really been a challenge for us. In some ways it makes things easier and more efficient. It's definitely made us think a bit more about how we can leverage our digital capabilities as well to kind of increase our messaging.
Yes, definitely. You've just mentioned, obviously, the platforms that we're using to engage now. There has been a rapid adoption of those kind of platforms over the past few months. Share with us in terms of IR digitization. It's obviously a buzzword. It's something that preceded the crisis. But what are the kind of tools that you're using in terms of your IR outreach that makes it so effective and efficient?
Yeah, of course. I think, as you say, there's definitely significant advantages from using and leveraging digital tools, and something we're increasingly looking at and using more and more. I think one area where it can be particularly helpful is using digital platforms really to kind of increase our messaging around strategy and performance, and making that increasingly accessible and understandable. Also to kind of a broader investor base, and obviously a more global investor base. That's what the digital tools allow you to do. Another area where it definitely can be helpful is, in IR, you're getting increasing amounts of information from all sorts of parts of the business, and certainly digital tools can help you to be more efficient and more discerning in really leveraging that enormous amount of data that we're receiving up from different parts of the business. That's definitely an area where it can be useful. And then maybe something else to mention would just be in terms of kind of anticipating better the interests of investors and their expectations, whether that's us being kind of more aware of the macro pressures that they're facing, or whether they're implementing new strategies or having new factors that they favor, thinking about how that might impact them at a fund level or a firm level as well. So, really better anticipating the needs of investors certainly is an area where digital can be useful.
Yeah, very good. ESG is obviously an area that is continually growing of importance. Perhaps you can share with us how you engage with investors with regards to your ESG strategy. What kind of events are you organizing around ESG, perhaps, and also in terms of reporting, but also where are you at in terms of the journey specifically?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think on the journey, we're doing a lot of work on ESG, as I'm sure many companies are. Really, for us, it's about working hand in hand, kind of with our subject matter experts and with the team on the ground that are running it, to kind of help investors really better understand the reality of the work that we're doing and what that means on the ground. Obviously, from an investor standpoint, many investors are still working through exactly how ESG is going to impact their decision making and exactly how to integrate it, which clearly means increased appetite for information and data from IR teams. So we're working through the best ways to communicate that, but we're really trying to do that with our subject matter experts as well. I think maybe one of the challenges with ESG can be actually kind of making investors aware of some of the trade-offs there. And I don't necessarily mean kind of trade-offs in terms of impact versus, financial returns, but even kind of the trade-offs in terms of, say, packaging, making packaging sustainable, but also making sure that it's fit for purpose. So even within kind of the impact of ESG, that there's trade-offs as well. And that can be sometimes a challenge to get that message across to investors if that's perhaps, obscured by some of the more higher level commitments or metrics. And a big focus for us in terms of ESG as well has been really helping to explain the financing of our sustainability commitments and how that fits into the bigger picture of the business, and the fact we don't see this as an add-on, that it is really integrated, and we see that as being quite core to our competitive advantage. Actually, consumers increasingly looking for sustainable products, regulation coming in if you're lagging behind, so really a competitive advantage if you can be ahead. And also kind of the motivation that it gives our employees. I think our management would say that it's really a topic that they would say they've never seen anything that brings together the employees as much as ESG and sustainability. In terms of kind of practical terms, what we're doing from a reporting perspective, we have been really trying to integrate ESG into our communications. So in each of our quarterly reports, we actually have a section called Business as a Force for Good, where we try to actually delve in a little bit more detail into one specific topic in the ESG space to ensure that we're continuing to engage with investors in the ESG world.
Very exciting. We've recently conducted a poll with investors and corporates to understand what the market sentiment is on the activist front. And indeed, the investors actually anticipate an increase in activism. We don't see the level of preparation or readiness on the corporate side. Share with us your view on activism, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we'd say really is that we ensure that we engage with all of our shareholders, and we make sure that we listen to them and we respect all of the views that we hear. I think it comes kind of back to this point of IR being this two-way street. So, our role is obviously about ensuring the investors understand our strategy and that they get value from our engagements. But at the same time, it is just as important that the management understands the views that investors have as well. So I think that's where the IR role is very important, to maintain that two-way dialogue and really listening and respecting the views of investors, I think would be our strategy there.
Very well. We've just talked about ESG and IR digitization, big trends that are obviously impacting the IR landscape. Well, a few years ago, we had MiFID from a regulatory standpoint impacting IR. Where do you see the future trends and what may they bring in terms of opportunities or also threats for the IR function and the strategic role it is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think you're absolutely right, as you say, data and investors having more and more access to data, and the level of detail that's now expected is certainly much higher, whether that's on ESG or whether it's on, operating metrics more generally. So I think that's a changing role for IR to really help to manage this increased amount of data, and certainly requires IR to be more agile and quicker in the communication that we do as well. The increase in passive investing would be another area to bring up. Clearly, these are investors who have a different focus, often more longer term. So that can be, both a challenge and an opportunity in terms of communication, managing their different expectations, and really IR kind of changing the way that you engage with those investors. And maybe the final thing to mention would be the changing interaction with the buy side. You mentioned, following MiFID II, we're certainly seeing kind of more requests for direct interaction and engagement, which certainly can be an opportunity for your IR as well.
Yes, absolutely. And part of the survey obviously evaluates the detailed deliverables and activities of your IR engagement, where you've also scored very highly across them, whether it is now your financial disclosure or the business and market knowledge that you also bring as a team, or the quality of your roadshows. From your experience, also having been on the sell side before and recently move into the IR role, what do you feel are the must-haves in terms of running such a successful IR program? And what are the must-have tools, but also structures, if you like?
Yeah, of course. So I think in the Nestle IR team, we have kind of a set of principles, which I think works very well. So that's timeliness, transparency, and trust. And they obviously link together quite nicely. And the last two kind of in particular, because we work very hard really to make sure that we have candid conversations, both externally with our investors and also internally, as I said, to make sure that information is really flowing both ways. And that's something certainly I saw in my old role on the sales side as well, in my interactions with Nestle. It's something that it's clear that the team had that, and moving across now, I can understand why that works so well, making sure that really the stakeholders that we interact with get a lot of value from our interactions, and that we're timely in our responses, and also transparent as much as we can be as well. I think kind of the other thing I would say is really to be always learning, constantly asking questions, continuing to evolve. And I think that's probably the best way to build up your messaging, and also to think ahead, which is an important thing to do in IR as well.
Yeah, completely agree. Sophie, I hope you don't mind. We will switch gear now and ask you some other questions through our quick question round. Name a historic person, please, Sophie, that you would like to meet, and what would you ask them?
Mine is a little light-hearted here, but it would be Coco Chanel, to ask her for some fashion advice. I think she'd be a very fascinating person to meet.
Yeah, fantastic. Especially coming out of the pandemic now. I think we all have to.
Yeah, I've forgotten what it's like to to dress up.
Favorite band or singer you have?
It's actually Snow Patrol. It was actually the last band that I went to see in concert before the pandemic.
Excellent. And do you have a favorite quote from a movie that you use in regular life?
So the quote that I'd say is actually a Star Wars quote from Yoda, of all people. But the quote is, "Do or do not, there is no try." So really about kind of giving something your all, and the power that commitment can have.
Yeah, fantastic. Good old wise Yoda. And what's your favorite board game, or how do you relax, Sophie?
I really like Cluedo, actually. Our family has kind of an annual Christmas Cluedo tradition, so that's probably my favourite board game. But more generally, really enjoy running, something that I've always done, find it a good way to relax, absolutely. And one of the few things that the pandemic hasn't impacted, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. You can still do that. And a resolution or personal objective for 2021?
Yeah, my resolution was actually to improve my language skills, specifically using the Duolingo app every day to kind of refresh the knowledge of my French that I once learned at school, and now working for a Swiss company. Important to refresh my French and maybe learn some German as well. So yeah, improving my language skills.
Fantastic. Well, Sophie Pugh, thank you so much for your time here today. And again, congratulations for a fantastic achievement in the 2020 Europe Executive Team Survey. And hopefully we'll be able to meet in person this year in Switzerland. But all the best in this year's survey, and best of luck with your objectives.
Thank you very much, Amani. Much appreciated.